Hi, I'm Matt Slater from Cornwall Wildlife Trust, and I'm here to talk to you a bit about Shoreline Secrets. Now, UK marine life is astounding. We're surrounded by water. No matter where you live in the UK, you're not that far from the coast. And when you talk to people about UK wildlife, most people don't give you many marine species in their list of UK wildlife, but actually more than 50% of our species live in the sea. And we have thousands of incredible creatures and beautiful underwater landscapes all around our coastlines. This photo taken by Anita Sherwood was down off the Manacles, which is an amazing dive site near where I live. And it's absolutely stunning. It never ceases to amaze me how much life there is and how colourful marine life is in Cornwall and in the UK. This is a species that we see a lot of. This is a coral. So it's a pink sea fan coral, and very, very common in our waters in Cornwall. And yeah, there's so much great stuff down there. And the seas are so important to us, to many of us, in many ways. I mean, I personally get so much pleasure from being on, in, and near the sea. But the sea does so much more than that for us. It provides our oxygen. So every second breath we take is provided by plankton and seaweed, believe it or not, in the sea. The ocean regulates our climate and keeps our maritime climate nice and moist and cools us down. And it provides us with so much in terms of different resources such as seafood. We take sand and gravel from the seabed for building materials, and the sea is mined as well. So the seabed gets mined for things like oil and minerals. So anyway, here's a little shot of me in my natural environment. I've been fascinated by rock pools since I was a boy. We used to have a little fish tank at home, and we used to go and collect specimens and then study them in the aquarium, for a few days, and then put them back. And I've sort of carried that on, and I'm still really excited by marine life to this day, and I love sharing that enthusiasm with others. So I'm in charge of a project down here called Shore Search. It's actually last year it became a national project, and it's now carried out. It's a citizen science project that's carried out by by wildlife trusts all around the UK. And we get we have a really exciting time. We go down on the shore with large groups, and you never know what you're going to find. It's great fun, but whilst we're there, we're collecting really useful information that helps us monitor the health of our marine environments and look out for changes that are being faced by the marine environment. So I'm going to talk to you now quickly about some of my favourite rock pool creatures, and some of them are very familiar. So I'm expecting that in the audience, most of you will have seen one of these little blobs that you find stuck on the rock. And the rocks all around the coast of the UK. And when we were kids, it was always tempting, wasn't it, to go and give them a little poke. They feel like a blob of jelly, but you shouldn't poke them too hard. It's a bit mean because a little bit of water will come out, and that water is essential to them, really. So try and avoid doing that. Now, you look at those, and they look very different when the tide's out to how they look when the tide comes back in, and they open out like this, looking like a beautiful flower. But it is actually an animal, and it's trying to catch food all the time with its stinging tentacles, which it then brings into the mouth in the center. So they might look beautiful, but they're pretty dangerous if you're a small creature. Now, luckily, our skin is thicker than that of most small rockpool fish. So if you touch one of these on the tentacles, you're unlikely to get stung. Don't try it, just in case. None of our UK species are particularly dangerous. But yeah, what they're actually doing when you touch them, they sort of seem to stick onto you a little bit. And the reason for that is because they have thousands of tiny stinging cells that explode open and fire spiky barbs into your finger. Here's a little diagram, and it shows you these. They're called nematocysts, these cells that are packed full of water pressure. And as soon as the trigger hair gets sort of touched, it explodes open. And then there's different shapes and sizes. A lot of them have these sticky threads. Some of them have barbs, and some of them actually inject venom. So it's very lucky that our skin is thicker than most fishes. But if you're in a hot country, and you see sea anemones or corals, be very careful. Another group of organisms that has the same and are very closely related to the jellyfish. This is how they sting as well. Here's a picture which is recorded under a microscope that shows you what happens before and after the nematocyst fire. And this is actually a type of jellyfish, but you can see all those threads just suddenly appear instantly, making them pretty lethal to smaller creatures. Now, another animal that you might find very familiar to look at is a limpet. But not many people sort of stop and appreciate limpets. I think they're fascinating creatures. They're actually related to snails, so they're a mollusk, and they graze by scraping algae off the rocks. And if it wasn't for limpets, our rocky shores would be completely covered in seaweeds, because they're constantly sort of gardening and removing the seaweeds before they have a chance to grow. Now, when the tide drops out, they will hunker down onto the rocks and stick on really hard and try and conserve a little bit of water that they trap inside their shell. And over generations of hunkering down on the same bit of rock, you get these scars forming, what we call limpet homes, which are where the limpet grinds down into the rock. And if the rock's soft, it actually cuts a little bit of the rock, but also the shell of the limpet gets ground down. So they have a perfect fit whilst the tide's out. And when the tide covers them again, they go foraging off. But they'll always know where they are, and they'll always return to the same spot. Here's some of the tracks that they leave. And I took this photo in Kent on some chalk shore. And you can see here the white of the chalk shining through. And these little zigzaggy marks are made by the feeding parts of the limpet, which is called a radula. Here's some more detailed ones that I didn't take. The radula is quite an amazing little rasp-like structure, a bit like a tongue, I suppose. It sort of moves up and down, and it scratches those tiny microscopic seaweeds off the rocks. The structure of the radula itself is interesting. It's actually reinforced with iron. It's very, very strong. And that's how they manage to actually, as well as scrape off the rocks. You can see in those pictures, they also sometimes, scrape off the algae. They also sometimes remove a little bit of rock. Now, one thing that limpets are capable of that not many people appreciate is, they seem quite peaceful, and their strategy is just to hold on tight and wait for danger to pass. But actually, they can fight back. And here's a still from a little film that was made a few years ago when I worked in an aquarium, and we actually set up a tank with some limpets and some starfish. Now, neither the limpets or the starfish were harmed, you'll be pleased to hear. But what's amazing is if the limpet feels threatened by a predator like a starfish, it will actually mushroom and it will lift right up off the rock and then slam down onto the tentacles of the starfish. Pretty amazing. And I was really impressed the first time I saw that. Previously I thought limpets were a little bit, bit boring and ordinary, but they're amazing. They can fight back. Okay, the next creature to show you, it's a shrimp-like creature, very tiny. This is highly magnified, and they swim around. They're very common all around our coasts, but you would not recognize this creature from that larvae at all. It totally changes as it grows older. And what it has at the top of the head there, it has an organ that produces this sticky glue-like substance, and it's basically swimming around for a few, short period of time, maybe a few days or weeks, until it finds the right sort of substrate. So nice hard rock is popular, or sometimes some species will actually stick onto driftwood and floating objects. And once they've stuck on, they basically cement their head onto that surface. They then start to grow shells all around their body and totally transform into a creature that I'm sure most of you will have seen before. Very tiny little creatures stuck all over the rocks. And I'm sure you'll know what these are. They're called barnacles. So amazing things. They are actually related to shrimps and lobsters, so they're crustaceans. But for the rest of their life, then they don't move, except when the tide comes in and covers their shell. And as you can see at the top, there's like a little trap door that will open up like a car sunroof, and out pop the legs. And you can see it in this film that I made just a couple of days ago. You see these large legs coming out of these volcano barnacles, and the legs have now become their feeding apparatus, their filter feeders, catching plankton from the water around. Absolutely beautiful creatures. Now, the next fact I'm going to tell you, I've got to warn you, is quite an interesting fact. So how do they breed? Well, when they want to find a mate, they can't move. They're cemented to the rock. They're there for life. So, interesting fact for you guys, in the animal kingdom, in relation to its body size, the barnacle has the longest penis. So there you go. Sorry about that, everyone. But yeah, you learned something today, some of you, I'm sure. And that's what they do. They basically feel around and try and find a mate. So yeah, a bit different, different to the lifestyle of most crustaceans. But a fascinating group of organisms, the barnacles. Now, there are some creatures, though, that eat barnacles. And here we've got probably one of the prime suspects. This is a dog whelk munching away on barnacles. Dog whelks are incredible little snails that, unlike most snails, these aren't vegetarians. These are meat eaters. And they love gobbling up barnacles, but they'll even take on bigger prey. And this is a mussel shell. I've actually got one here. When you're on the beach looking for shells, if you pick up some mussel shells, always have a close look. They quite often have a tiny little hole drilled in it, and this one has. And you can see in the picture there, that's done using their radula. So what they do is they release acids that weaken the shell, and they scratch it away, and then they do that again. And layer by layer, they eventually make a hole in the mussel. Then they squirt in loads of saliva that dissolves all the meat, and they just suck back out some lovely mussel soup. They can even go through limpet shells. They're quite incredible, dog whelks. Another creature that likes to eat the barnacles. This is a shanny, very common rock pool fish. They're one of the few fish that can breathe out of water. So when the tide goes out, they stay put in their little crevices, and because they don't want to leave their territory. And then when the water covers the shore again, they'll be out there nipping the legs off the barnacles. That's what they eat. And here's two shannies in their crevice. Yeah, they really are super rock pool fish. Very common. Their sort of face looks a little bit like a frog. They're a member of the blenny family, the most common blenny in the UK. When I'm out with my volunteers shore searching, sometimes we come across something really exciting. And I'd never forget the first time I saw one of these. I thought we'd found a new species. It looks like a tropical squat lobster with this bright colours. Sadly, we found out it's not actually a new species. It was a juvenile, and they are blue striped squat lobsters. Isn't that amazing how different the colour is from the adult to the juvenile? It's great though. Every time we go out, you find something new. We found corals in rock pools. This is a scarlet and gold cup coral. And actually, in caves in Cornwall and tucked away in nooks and crannies, there are populations of these that have been there possibly for hundreds of years. Absolutely amazing. When you lift up rocks, you never know what you might find. I love it when I find one of these. This is called a sea gherkin. It's a very small member of the sea cucumber family. And these are the ones that when they're frightened, they actually squirt their guts out of their bottom. It's all sticky and horrible. And that's a pretty extreme way of getting rid of a predator. And they can regenerate their guts. So it doesn't actually hurt them. But yeah, amazing creatures you find under almost every stone. And on one of our surveys a few years ago, one of the volunteers found a very unusual hermit crab. Turned out it was a warm water species that's moved back into Cornish waters. There were a few sightings in the 1960s, and then it disappeared, and it's now back, and we're really excited. It ended up getting featured on Spring Watch, and there's Gillian Burke doing a lovely little piece about these crabs. It took us ages to find the crabs. It was quite stressful actually that day, but we did find some in the end. And the viewers of Spring Watch decided on a new common name for it. It's called the St. Piran's crab, after the patron saint of Cornwall. Now, if you're ever rock pooling this summer and you come across a little hermit crab with kind of reddish tentacles, look at the shape of the claws, and if they're the same size, you've probably found a St. Piran's crab. So this is a common hermit crab. It has a much larger right claw and white tips on the claws, whereas the St. Piran's crab has more sort of browny, sort of hairy claws. So I'm very lucky. Another part of my job is running Sea Search in Cornwall, and Sea Search is a national project run all around the British Isles. It's a partnership project between the Marine Conservation Society, the Wildlife Trust, and several other organisations. And it's great. We train divers who are already qualified to dive, but we train them to record wildlife. And we're getting all sorts of fascinating records coming in. One of my most memorable dives in recent years was underneath a mussel farm, where, because they're growing mussels hanging from ropes, basically all other types of fishing have been stopped. And under that mussel farm, there was so much life. There were big lobsters walking around, and crabs and sponges growing really tall. And, there was lots of fish life around the mussel farm. And it really sort of made me think, actually, if you protect an area of the seabed, it is capable of really bouncing back and loads more wildlife thriving within it. Recently, we're seeing a lot of octopus, although every dive I go on, I always seem to miss the octopus, but there you go. This guy, Mike, has taken some lovely pictures, and so has Warren. This is an octopus that's a bit startled, and they can change colour in front of your eyes. Absolutely stunning. And one species we're very pleased to be seeing is one that had been missing for about 40 years. This is the spiny lobster, or crawfish. It was heavily overfished by both divers and netters back in the sort of 60s and 70s, and absent virtually from the southwest of England until a few years ago. About 5 years ago, we started spotting little baby ones, which are now getting bigger, and we're really excited that they're making a comeback. And we're really hoping that they stick around, and then we don't have another situation where they get overfished. So we're asking divers to refrain from taking them. And a lot of the boats around Cornwall now, and rest of Devon, Dorset, are sticking these stickers up that just remind divers, that it's not cool to pick up crawfish. We're so lucky that we can see them again after so many years of them not being around. So how can you get involved? Well, we have loads of projects in Cornwall going on. Lots of other wildlife trusts do some great marine conservation work. Please get in touch with your local wildlife trust and see how you can help. You can take part in citizen science projects. We've got all sorts of stuff going on that you can do. And one thing that you can do for us right now is please support our campaign for more highly protected marine areas. The government is looking into this at the moment in detail, and we've got a real opportunity to see more protected areas where no harmful activity is carried out and wildlife is allowed to recover. We really need more of these. We don't have enough protection at all in our waters. So please visit this link and sign our petition and tell the government that you support better protection for our wonderful marine life. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. And please do visit our website and have a look as well on our social media and YouTube. We've got loads of great videos on there. And I hope you enjoyed listening to my little presentation. Thank you very much.